and then the pin is going to go in.
Yeah, I'm just trying to compress.
We sprayed a little bit of WD-40 on the pin to clean it, and now putting just a light coat of grease on here because the pads are going to move on that pin, and the pin won't wear so much if it just has a little bit of grease. Okay, so now the pin slides in and drives home, and then the clip goes in. If the hole's not showing, the pin's got to be knocked in further. But that could be done after the caliper's back on the bike. Just don't forget. And at this point, he's prying the pads. Now, just one drop of Loctite on the end of the bolt. Doesn't take much. Okay. And now I'm going to torque the bolts to the proper spec.
Which is not much.
Okay, hang on. Just wait a second. In order to seat the pin, he's going to take a drift and just knock it in with a hammer to seat it all the way. And just like the rear brakes, you knock it in until you can see the hole so that you can get the little clip back in. The pin goes in, and you want to make sure that the curved end of the pin faces the caliper. And that's all there is to changing the front brake pads, other than maybe bleeding them. Alright, so now we're going to break the tire loose. So what I like to do is take the valve stem nut off, and I use these valve caps that have a valve stem tool built into them, because then I don't have to wonder where I can find a valve stem tool. And the first thing you do is pull the valve stem out. Alright, so I've got some Ruglide in a spray bottle, and I'm going to put some of this around the edge because this makes life easy. Now, the first thing to try is stepping on it. It's a cheap tire, so I may actually break the bead loose like this. If not, at least I'm giving the Ruglide a chance to work down in there. Doesn't look like the bead's breaking loose. So I'm going to take my tire irons and work it around. There it goes. Okay, now with a good tire, this is a Chen Sheng tire I bought in Enid, Oklahoma on my way to the jailbreak last year. But with a good tire, it's quite a bit more difficult than that. Okay, so now you need to break the bead loose on the other side. You don't want to lay the thing on the disc. So we give a Ruglide. Okay. Alright, having a little trouble. There's a couple of things we can do. Alright, one of the things we can do is I've got this trash can made out of a 20-gallon drum, and it's got a piece of hose on it. And so what that means is I can work the tire like this. Another thing you can do is get some chunks of 2x4, put them on the ground in order to work it. So I'm going to just kind of work the bead here. Might have to put a little more root glide on there. Okay, a little more root glide. These rims are the toughest rims I've ever seen on anything. It's because there's no drop center to them to speak of. Ah, there we go. Okay, so the beads pop loose. All right, now the bead loose. Going to lever the first bead off. So the trick is you want to drive the bead into this. This is the drop to the rim right here. You want to push the bead on this side as far up in there as you can. You don't want to be right at the valve stem. So you push the bead up in there as far as you can. You can take your levers. It's time to go with 3 irons. Usually one of them just falls out. Kind of like that. Alright, there's one. There's two. Oh, come on. There we go. There's three. You don't want to put pressure on the disc because you'll warp it. Alright, that got it. So now, there we go. So the first bead is off. So with the first bead off, got to get the tube out. Push the valve stem in. This part's always kind of painful on the hands. Okay, there's the tube. So now, got to get the second bead off, which is always easier. Okay, once you get this guy started, normally, Lordy, once you get it started, normally you can just break it off the tire. I mean, break it off the wheel. All right. And there's the wheel. Alright, so we've got the wheel off, and what I'm going to do is bang on the spokes and make sure none of them need to be adjusted, because if they need to be adjusted while you have the tire off, it's the best time. Okay, none of the spokes are dead, so you don't get to see tightening the spokes. Okay, while we've got the wheel off, it's a good time to check the wheel bearings. So to do that, you stick your finger in there. Actually, you remove the cup, and you stick your finger in there, and you can feel the wheel bearing rotate. And if it feels real graunchy, it needs to be replaced. So this guy feels pretty good. That guy feels really good, and Do the carrier bearing as well. Oh yeah, that feels fine. Okay. Alright, so I've got the tire here. Bought it mail order, save money. So the first thing I want to do is remove the sticker, and then want to kind of bang it a little bit and see if there's any crud that's gotten in it, because if you get, I don't know, leaf crud or something gets kicked up in it from shipping or the garage or the carton that's shipped in or in the factory, I mean the warehouse, that crud can get in your tube and give you a flat. So I always like to try to get rid of that stuff. In this case, I got a piece of crud right here I'm trying to get. And I got it. Okay. So now, the thing you want to do is find the direction of rotation and the balance mark. Gotta get my glasses for that. Alright, so here's the rotation arrow. Now remember, the brake goes on the left side, so that rotation arrow is going to be like this. So this tire can only go on this way. So now let's check. There's some balance marks, and those are the only balance marks. Okay, so I'm going to get some Ruglide, and I'm going to plan this so it goes on the right way. So we're going to put this bead over this edge of the rim, and so that the disc is up when we're trying to lever the final bead over, so the balance marks are going to be down. So first we're going to do this rim, this bead. And we'll worry about getting the balance marks in the right place in a minute. Okay, so now, oh yeah, the drop center. This is the drop center. And you want to make sure, this is not much of a drop center when you compare it to a lot of other wheels. You want to make sure you have a rim band or at least some duct tape or electrical tape around there and a hole for your valve stem. You don't want the spoke nipples to be touching the tube, because they will wear holes in it. Okay, so now back to the tire irons. Okay, this is a Metzo, and it's a real stiff tire. Probably should have put it in front of the space heater for a while. Loosen it up. Okay, so we've got a couple tire irons in there, and with any luck, the bead's going to pop over. There we go. Okay, there. So we got the first bead in. Let's try not to lose the tire irons inside the tire. All right. Okay, so now I'm gonna reuse this tube. So before I do, I'm gonna blow it up. Now I'm gonna put the stem back in, the core, and put a little spit on that so it seals real well. I could put Ruglide on there or something, but in any case, I'll put that bad boy in there. Then I'm going to look at this tube real carefully. I want to inspect it here where it would rub the nipples for the spokes, and see if I see or feel anything that looks to be a wear spot. And I think we're doing okay. So what I like to do is put talcum powder on the tube, because what this does is it lets the tube slip around inside the tire and run cooler. So what I do is put some on the inside, kind of rub it around with my hand. I do this every time, so where did all the talcum powder go from last time? It just kind of got used up, I guess. Okay, so now I got a bunch of talcum powder on there. And now I'm going to fit it in the tire. So I have to find the valve stem hole, and I'm going to let some of the air out of this, but not a whole lot. Okay, so now you can see how it's got some air in it, but it's still squishy. The idea is, if you don't have any air in it, you're more liable to pinch it, and if you have too much in it, it's impossible to fit the tire. So what I want to do is get the tube in here. I cleaned the rim real good. You didn't see that part. So we'll stuff the tube in all the way around. Okay, now it's kind of difficult part, and that is getting the stem, the valve stem, come through the hole. And different people have different methods. Some folks like to tie a piece of fishing line or dental floss or something on there, but I prefer just the brute force method, maybe some cussing. Okay, I got it. So now, as soon as you get it, you want to get that nut on there so that it doesn't back out, but you don't want to screw the nut all the way on. Just get it on, screwed on there till it's till the valve stem's poking out the other end. Of course, I'm trying to screw the nut on with my left hand, and I'm right-handed. Okay, now the fun begins. The first thing you want to do is get the marks lined up with the valve stem, because most manufacturers mark the tire at the lightest place. So you want to put that at the valve stem. And you can see how the valve stem's kind of turning back and forth a little bit. You want to try to get it centered, but this is not the final fitment because it's probably going to rotate around as we lever it on there. Now we've got the disc up. The first bead's on there. It's time for some more Roux Glide. All right, now the fun begins. Okay, as before, you don't want to start or finish at the valve. So what I'm going to do is try to walk this tire on here. Okay, we're coming past the valve now. All right, we want to get the bead way down in there. Alright, here's where it starts getting tricky. Almost. Maybe I can work that with my heels. Nope. Okay, one thing we could try here is a C-clamp to stop the thing. Okay, we've got to get that last little bit of the bead over. So it looks like it's going to take just walking it on. Just walking it on with the turns. There it goes. Okay. Alright. Now, the tire's fully mounted, but the bead's not seated, and we've got to make sure that the marks are at the valve stem. So, they look to be pretty close there. So it's time to inflate the tire. So we've got to get the nut screwed on enough to get the valve stem out far enough to get the inflator on. Okay, now we're going to inflate the tire and seat the beads. Okay, so you know the beads have been seated when you can see this edge here. You see this little line is equidistant from the rim all the way around, and it is on both sides. There's a couple of things you can do if it won't seat. Of course, if you use Ruglide, it'll seat easily, but if you don't, sometimes you can pick up the tire and beat it where it didn't come out, whatever. Anyway, I run it up to 50 pounds, which is not where I'm going to run the tire, and I tighten the nut up. Then I take the valve stem back out, completely let all the air out of the tube, and so that the tube can settle, and then I inflate it to the final pressure. Okay, so now with the tube totally deflated, it totally relaxes. The bead is still seated all the way around the tire, so now when the tube is inflated, it will inflate evenly and no place on the tube will be strained. So I don't think you want to hear this thing inflate again. So now we're going to remove the swing arm and grease the swing arm bearings and the suspension linkage. We've got to pull the suspension linkage before we pull the swing arm. So I've assembled some of the tools that we need here. We're going to need a pair of 17mm wrenches and a pair of 22mm sockets and a 10mm Allen and a 19mm wrench, and I think that's going to be everything that we need to do this job. Oh, and a screwdriver. There are two of these little clips, which if you're lucky you won't break them when you open them up. And you got to open both of these. There's one there and one a little further up, so that you can take the brake line loose, because you want to remove the caliper. And there's a metal clip here. You just kind of pop it out, and then the caliper's free. All right. We're going to take our 10mm Allen. 19. Alright. Now what that does is gets the links loose. Now the swing arm's hanging down. And then we get 2 17s. Oops. 2 17s to take this loose. Now this bolt goes in from the inside, the other bolt goes in from the inside also, and you really have to do them that way, and you have to take them off in this order because the other bolt goes into a welded nut. So once we get this nut off, take this bolt out. Oh, okay, got to do the other bolt first. And this bolt comes out, it's a short bolt, and then the link comes out. We'll put that aside, and then this bolt can come out. You've got to remember to put them back in the right order. Okay, so now we have both links. And then we're going to prop up the swing arm so we can remove the link. Okay, just take a little piece of wood, prop up the swing arm, and then we can use the 217s. Okay, this is actually the shock bolt. If you have a stock shock, there's a captive nut. Okay. Now I gotta get another tool. When I said I thought I had all the tools I need, I made a mistake. Gotta have a 13 and a 6mm Allen. So what I'm gonna do now is loosen the brake pivot bolt. To get it out of the way. This is the bolt that holds the roller on the Classic. This is just so that I can get the wrench in to get the other guy. Okay, now I'm going to use an 8mm Allen from the other side and a 17 on that nut. Alright, I've got the swing arm up out of the way, got the wrench on the nut, and I'm using a ball tip Allen, but you can do it with a standard. And now, with the nut off, I can get the bolt out and free the linkage completely. Okay. So stop a second. This is the link, and you need to pay attention to the fact that the bump goes up and the top one goes toward the back. So when you go to put it in, you don't get confused. Okay. Take the swing arm off. First thing you do is pop these two caps off. They're little plastic caps, and then you can see there's either the head of the bolt or the nut is in there. So you pop them loose on both sides, and then you get the two 22mm sockets, and you put one on one side and one on the other. You ready?
Yep.
Okay. And I'll get in there. There we go. Alright, now we've got the nut off. There's a washer in there. And then take a screwdriver or other object and the swing arm bolt will pull out. Now the swing arm itself is loose at this point, but it's sort of jammed in there. There's some parts you got to watch for when you take it out. So we get the chain out of the way. Ready? Ready?
Yeah, it's recording.
Okay. And pull the swing arm out. Up. Pull the screwdriver out. And the swing arm comes straight out the back. Okay. Alright, this is a nylon washer and it's stuck to the bike, so I'm going to leave it there. And down here is another nylon washer, and these guys want to fall out, and they're kind of hard to get back in when you put the thing together. That's the hard part, is getting it back in there with these in place. So that's what you got to watch for. Those are the parts that fall out and make your life a little difficult. Now, before we take any of the bearings out, what we want to do is get everything real clean, so that so that no crud goes in. And the way that these bearings are, there's an inner race, and it just pops right out. Can you see in there with the camera how the bearings are? Okay, those are all loose needles in there, and the needles will come right out. You don't want to take them out, but just for the purposes of education, we'll kind of pop them loose. Okay, can you see that loose needle there? So the needles get loose, and you don't want any of the needles to fall out, but you want to pack this bearing. So the best way to do that is just to get your finger. Let me get the needles back in here. Or stop the camera. All right, so with your finger fairly clean, you get a little blob of grease, and you want to get it in there and press it into the bearings. You want to try to press it in there so that you don't knock them out. If you knock them out, they're kind of a pain in the butt to get back in. You got to get them all in. So put a good coating of grease in there. Okay, so that's a nice fresh coat of grease, and then you want to push the grease into the bearings all the way around. All right, and then we take the race and slip it back in there, and if all goes well, none of the bearings will come out. If they come out, you have to take the race back out and do it again. All right, so that worked well, and that bearing feels very nice. So we'll go ahead and do the other one, so you can turn it off. All right, when I did the second one, when I pressed the race in, the bearing, one of the needles came out. So one way to get the needles back in is to just take a small screwdriver, and you can position it in there. So there it is. Make sure it has plenty of grease on it, and push the race back in again. Okay, and that time. Now on the link, this bearing is identical to the ones in the short links, but you can see that the bearings at the other ends are larger, and this is not the same bearing at this end, and you can see, I don't know if you can see, it's a double bearing. Can you see in there?
Yep.
Okay, and it's the same with the one at the small end. The one at the small end uses two of the same bearings that we already greased, so this one is also a double bearing.
Okay.
Okay? Alright, with the double bearing, we're going to have to be sure that we get in from each end, and we need to make sure that all the needles are seated, because it's possible when you push the inner race through, you'll knock a bearing into the gap. You'll knock a needle into the gap between the two bearings. So we want to be real careful how we do this. I don't know if you can see, there's some of the old grease is coming out on my finger. That's fine. Get plenty of new grease in there, and then we'll spin the bearing around. Alright, so that's got plenty of grease. Now we'll push this in. Okay, there's no needles in there, and we can spin this around to make sure that everything gets greased up real well. Do the same with the other end. Okay, now we're going to do the swing arm bearings. These are a little trickier. When you push this out, there's these two little felt seals. We actually lube the bearings the same way, but remove the felt seals, and we'll lube the bearings the same way, and then we'll push one felt seal in and push the race back in. So you can see the bearings in there. We're going to just go ahead and lube them the same way. All right. So we've got the bearing greased. I'm going to push the felt seal in. Hopefully it'll stay. And the race has a lip on it. The lip goes to the inside. The lips face the shock. So we're going to push this in, and then it pushes some grease out the other end. I'm going to wipe off that grease. You can see there's some old grease mixed in with the new. And then we're going to take this other felt seal and press it into the recess there. This is where it gets a little tricky. It's all got to stay in there, or it's very hard to get the swing arm back in. So with both of those seals flush, this half is done, and then we'll do the other half. All right, so we're going to put the felt seal in on this side and push the race through. And it pushes out a bunch of grease. So we'll wipe the grease off and then put the seal on the other side. This is where it's a little tricky. You can see it's kind of burping out some grease there. Okay, so the seal's in both sides and the race is in. So we've greased all the bearings and we're ready to start to put it back together. There's the nylon washers that go on the end of the races. And these go on the outsides of both sides of the swing arm. And there's a nylon washer that lives up in the bike on each side. And this is where it gets kind of tricky. So you need to get the chain up out of the way. So I'm going to temporarily put it above the roller. I have to remember to pull it down off the roller. And now look at the bolt. And the bolt, the paint's gone, or the plating's gone a little bit off the bolt, but it's not in bad shape. It's not really scored. So the bolt can go right back in there. So now comes the tricky part. Alright, so I got the bolt mostly in, but I want to stop and make sure that none of the washers came out. So I'm going to take a light and look up in there and make sure that all my washers are in the right places. The swing arm looks pretty tight, so it looks like they're all in the right place. It looks pretty tight looking laterally. So now all I need to do is keep the swing arm lined up and knock the bolt in. Now with the swing arm back in, I'll put the washer and the nut back on and then torque it. With the swing arm bolt in and the washer and the nut on it, I'm now going to torque it to the proper torque spec. And you can measure it with a torque wrench, or you can rely on experience if you think you know what you're doing.
Go.
All right, we're going to put the right hand link in first. Okay, this has a washer and a lock washer. and there's a captive bolt in the other side. So we get this guy torqued down, and you can see that even though it's torqued down, it's still, the bearing still has action. Then we'll take the other one and make sure that you get the things pointing in. Take the other one, slip it in there. Bolt and the nut and the washer. Washer and the nut. And torque this down. Alright, so now we're going to connect the lower links. To do that, we need to drop the swing arm back down to where it's happy. Put the bolt in there. Got one. There's the other one. Alright. And we'll put the washer on. And the nut. And we'll torque this down as well. Okay. I'm going to put the brake back on. And so in order to do that, remember we have two clips and this little metal thing. So pop the metal thing up. The brake's just going to sit right there. And then the hose goes in those little clips and they just snap. There's two of those. And now notice the chain is under this roller and it's above the roller. It's above the bottom roller. So we're in good shape to reinstall the rear wheel, and we've already covered that.